All right, so this week's poem was focused on defining ethics as a group, exploring how ethics shape leadership, and how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. So the book defines ethics as standards of moral conduct and judgment on what behavior is right and or wrong. So I think just to kind of start high level, I think with public leadership especially, well, it's described as, anticipating changes or ethical concerns that are going to come up. And I think just kind of from the ideal perspective, implementing Kant's categorical imperative because, they themselves to their employees as well as their customers and other stakeholders, as highly ethical as possible. And the book also mentioned that treating the public as like a partner is really imperative when it comes to ethical leadership, especially with the public. Because then, they're open to feedback. They're gonna, take into concern what the public's concerns are. And I think like with a lot of things nowadays, there's always something new that is going to be that could possibly be ethically challenged, whether it's the environment or social issues. So being able to anticipate those things will be really important when it comes to public leadership.
Yeah, first of all, going with the ethical perspective, I think all of them definitely had things that I really liked, but the one that really struck me as something that I think is really, I guess, really wise is the Kant's categorical imperative, where he says, or part of that idea is that if everyone made the same decision that I'm going to make, what would the end result be? And that's a way that I think quite a bit. Like I oftentimes will think, okay, this decision that I'm going to make, if everyone made this decision, what would it look like? And so I think that's a pretty I think that's a pretty broad kind of approach to ethical behavior. And as for public leadership, I think like you said, that it's kind of like a partnership or a two-way dialogue. I think a lot of times public leaders will stand up and be like, they will champion a certain ethical idea, but they won't actually dialogue with the other side, or they will ridicule the other side or something like that. And that's not going to make any progress. And so I think part of the ethical leadership when it comes to being a public leader is to speak in such a way where you can actually influence the other side and dialogue with the other side and understand the other side, to hopefully make some progress, not just be kind of on this pedestal saying like, oh, this is what I'm like and this is what I believe and blah 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 blah, but actually trying to work with the other side.
Yeah, I really like the altruism one, where it says like it makes concern for others the ultimate ethical standard. I just feel like just right now, especially especially just like in politics and stuff, like, and really like any big CEOs, like it's all about like money and greed and power right now. And I feel like it's just like funny when I watch like politics and stuff, and I think like their job is literally supposed to be to serve us, but it's like all they do is serve, which I know that's like so like known, but like I just feel like ethics, like whenever I read these sections, like because every class like has like especially in communication, like they always have like an ethical like chapter and stuff, and I always just read it and it just sounds so ideal, but I feel like nowadays we have like very little like ethical leaders right now, like whether it's like with like large corporations or companies. I've had like a couple like my leaders like that I've had, I feel like I feel like the less like powerful you have, the easier it is to be ethical. But I feel like, yeah, so that just kind of stood out to me.
There's a section in chapter 11 about the challenge of power, and it kind of talks about like what types of power to use and how to learn when to use them, and that just it goes along with what you're saying, just because you're right, like right now, just yeah, especially in politics, I feel like everything is very messed up because we have our ethics of like what should be going on, but what we're seeing is completely different. But yeah.
So I'll kind of chime in along with both of you. So I thought this was really cool. It says in chapter 11, a leader is a person who has an unusual degree of power to create the conditions under which other people must live and move and have their being, conditions that can be either as illuminating as heaven or as shadowy as hell. A leader must take special responsibility for what's going on inside his or her own self, inside his or her consciousness, lest the act of leadership create more harm than good. And it's kind of interesting because you think about those leaders that are good leaders and those ones that take their power and do other things with them. And I liked that altruism also. And it basically talked about political parties, operating a business, educating students, and it's saying societies function more effectively when people act on behalf of others. And that's truly what I believe. Like, I've just seen so many good and bad leaders, that the ones that actually made decisions that were, best for the team or cared about team bonding or listening or empowering their team to make their own decisions. Those are the ones that, they did great things. So, yeah, in the public, that could be anybody. That could be like a city hall leader. It could be, I think about school board people, people that are making powerful decisions, and, they've got to take like what's the right thing to do and like what's going to impact the community and make the best decision possible without being selfish. So.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting ones, probably the most interesting, the ethical perspectives, is the justice is fairness one. And I think the second principle, which is when it acknowledges that there will be social and economic inequalities and different positions and stuff like that. But one of the classifications it makes for that is that the people who are serving in these offices and positions ought to serve to the benefit of the least advantaged members of society, which I think is really, like, that is really cool. I think, like, yes, there are going to be people in power, like there are going to be offices in power, but as long as we have an equal right to get to those offices, and that when those people are there, they use their power to serve the people with the least power, I think that's a really interesting and I think helpful way to view power, like to use it to use power for the good rather than just for self. Because I don't think power is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just often abused. So being able to kind of redirect that power is helpful.
Yeah, I feel like nowadays it's not that, well, it's definitely abused in politics, I want to say, especially with the situation that we're currently in right now. But I just feel like the leaders that we have right now were never really taught how to use their power, or just how to express their power or express themselves in ways that come across in more helpful and like understanding ways. There's this one part of chapter 11 that kind of reminds me of Donald Trump. So I just wanted to read to you guys. It says, powerful leaders frequently protect their status by attacking those they view as threats and justify their lofty positions by assuming that powerless people aren't as qualified or
Oh my God. Oh.
I got a phone call, sorry. Aren't as qualified or valuable to the organization as they are. They are tempted to use subordinates as means to achieve their ends and employ to get their way. So basically, it's just saying, like, when somebody is feeling threatened, they like to challenge that person and go after them directly. And it just reminded me of Donald Trump on Twitter.
His Twitter, yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's funny. Yeah, like I feel like with like politics and stuff, like it's like literally in like every branch, like both parties, like because my mom works for like she works with a lot of politicians for like campaign finance and stuff. And like the money that they get, like they'll get like certain candidates will like get money from like and they only like I went to like one of the events and it was literally at this like super rich guy's house. I forget who the politician was, but all he was doing was like making pitches to like the richest people because that's like who he cares about. Like that's who's going to give him the most money. Like, and that, so it's like, it's funny to me. Like, I'm like, this isn't even what like the leadership is supposed to be about. Like, it's just, you're just trying to figure out who's going to benefit you the most. You know, it's like selfish. And I feel like it's totally not what this whole chapter is about, like how so many politicians are about.
One other thing I wanted to kind of touch on what Drew was talking about with justice is fairness and how they were talking about the veil of ignorance. And I think that is just a really good way to try and make decisions. It's not just for like super powerful people, for like me as a follower now, or you know, my future roles, whatever they may be. Just kind of, it's a hard thing to do, just kind of take yourself out of it, and then just kind of look for the best it says the best option is the one whose worst outcome is better than the worst outcomes of all other options. So just doing like the least amount of harm as possible. I think that's a really good way to go about everyday decision making. Because if you can kind of get yourself into that mindset of, you know, trying to be equitable and fair at all times, and that kind of leads into virtue ethics that the book was talking about, and how you have these, you know, ideal virtues that you need to, you know, identify and implement, but then also practice. So practicing those virtues and kind of this idea of the max-min rule can help, you know, make long-term changes to behaviors.
I think it's kind of interesting how everybody talks about politics. I think the worst part, and I'll be honest, of every job I've ever had is playing politics at work. Mm-hmm. Like you literally either have to play the game
or finesse,
or what?
Or like have the game play you.
Yeah, exactly. And so like the most valuable advice I got was like, Anna, always play nice in the sandbox. I was like, okay. Nice in the sandbox. So that'll be my ending.
That's funny.
Not what I'm good at.
I don't like sandboxes.
I don't like playing with mean people either.
Yeah, I'm at my current work right now. I'm trying to promote, but what I'm noticing is that there is very much this game that has to be played to behave in a certain way and please the right people and do all this kind of stuff. And like the people who get promoted are the ones who can make themselves look good to their bosses and stuff, but not necessarily treating the people below them very well. And so it's really tough to like manage this thing where it's like, okay, like, yes, you got to play the game in a sense, but also I refuse to kind of just ignore the people below me or try to use them for my own gains, you know? So like, it's always kind of this tough thing to do, you know? It's like, how do I manage it? Yeah.
It's like a cat and mouse fight.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, you guys, we've satisfied our time requirement. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add in before we end this?
I'm good.
Good.
All right, cool.